Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to tonight's special event. We have Quentin Phipps and Gavin Hurlimann in a debate about worldviews entitled Gavin's Life Philosophy is Better Than Quentin's Philosophy, and Gavin will be taking the affirmative position. So Quentin, would you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, just in case we got somebody here who has not had the pleasure of meeting you?
Hi, my name is Quentin Phipps. I'm a ginger, as you can see. I am agnostic. I hold to the belief that I can't confirm that there is a God, nor deny that there isn't a God. I'm a YouTuber. I just restarted my channel a couple of weeks ago. I run in all kinds of corners. I talk about all kinds of stuff. My YouTube channel is Quentin Phipps, the Random Ginger. And yeah, that's really all I got so far.
All right, Gavin, that makes it your turn, boss.
Hello. Shalom. Shalom. How is the sound?
Good on my end.
That sounds perfect. Go ahead and introduce yourself and go ahead and start into when you're comfortable. We'll start the timer as soon as you start into your opening statement.
Yep, sure. My name is Gavin. I live in New Zealand, at the bottom of the world. There's about a 3-second delay, so if you can just excuse us sometimes if we get a bit mixed up and that kind of thing. I'm arguing tonight that the Christian worldview is a far more superior worldview than anything around. So I guess I might as well start. I think I've got 10 minutes. Richard, would you mind giving me like a 2-minute warning, please?
I would. Okay,
cool. So I'll start. So I believe the Christian worldview is the most superior worldview, simply because truth matters regardless of beliefs. Now, integrity is the most important point. We as individuals should be able to explain why we accept or reject some particular view of the world, and our explanation should reflect our actual beliefs in question. This requirement applies universally. Now, I'm not suggesting that atheists or non-believers are uninformed. On the contrary, I acknowledge that many non-believers can articulate the Christian position accurately. However, it's been my experience that when asked to explain Christianity, it's often presented in a sort of a cartoonish kind of fairy tale type way from non-believers. So if I'm belaboring the point, it's only because of this misreputation of Christianity. It's often a key component to an unbeliever's argument. So let's consider that absolute proof is actually rare. It's very rare in human experience. There's virtually no circumstance where anyone has the ability to prove mathematically, logically, infallibly anything before he acts. Does this mean that we cannot act? No, of course not. But it does mean that we are constantly acting when we have good reasons, but not absolute 100% proof. That, in a nutshell, is the faith, what the Bible calls for, or in the Greek language, pistis. Rather than calling us to place faith or trust in the world or other people, God calls us to place our faith, our reasonable trust in him and his message to us. Atheists and non-believers actually exhibit faith of this kind every day. The difference is the object of that faith, not in the substance. Atheists, non-believers, they exhibit faith, reason, trust every time they sit on a chair without checking it first for stability, or when they hop in the car to drive somewhere. They exhibit faith that the car's going to start and everything is going to be fine. Non-believers also exhibit faith when they eat a cooked meal at a restaurant, that they're not going to get poisoned, or when they take medication prescribed by the doctor. We cannot have absolute proof of any of these things. We cannot have absolute proof that any of these things are reliable each and every time, but we can have good reason to trust in them. The reality of the human experience is that we cannot know everything. We have no choice but to act in trust and faith and pistis, based on what we have good reason to believe. Or if we can't prove it, even if we can't prove it, sorry about that. So Christianity is not an escape from reason or a free fall into blind faith. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. It's a truth that draws even unwilling converts on the strength of the evidence. Now, Christianity is uniquely tied to reason and evidence. The Bible is unique in its approach to reason and evidence. Even Christ our Saviour appealed to evidence when he was challenged in John chapter 5. Jesus acknowledges that others won't or can't believe what he's saying on blind faith. So he offers three lines of evidence as reasons to trust him. Number one is human testimony. Number two is observation. And number three is written records. John 5:30-47. The earliest believers in the early church in the A&E constantly referred to the facts and evidence as support for their message. Now, God doesn't ask us to follow him blindly or ignorantly or without doubts. Rather, Christianity offers reasons to believe. And these are evidence in nature, evidence in science, evidence in logic, evidence in history, evidence in the human experience. Oh, I'm just flipping over the page. Oh, sorry about that. Now, non-believers, atheists, agnostics, etc., frequently point to science or even scientism as a catch-all counter to religion. It should be noted that without a Christian worldview, what we call modern science wouldn't even be possible. It wasn't until a culture approached the universe from a Christian perspective that the modern scientific method was born. Science, as we know it, assumes that the universe is rule-bound, repeatable, testable, knowable, and subject to our human manipulation, all of which are uniquely theistic, particularly the Judeo-Christian concepts. Atheism, like modern science, co-opts these tenets, but they all flow from a theistic worldview. Now, it also bears mentioning that interpretation is not always the same as fact. This is true in religion as in science. Rejecting or disproving one particular facet of a belief system doesn't necessarily mean the entire idea is wrong. It might be that a particular idea that's an error, but there's no need to throw, the baby out with the bathwater. For instance, the age of the earth is a classic example. It's not salvific, so it's not like that important. What is important to know and remember is that to consider what happens when people actually apply a particular philosophy to the real world. Naturally, no two people have exactly the same understanding of how to live out a specific idea, and people often do things completely contradictory to their state of belief. Yes, it's possible to look at the world and see which ideas seem to work and which don't. Beliefs have consequences. Atheism or non-belief in God, like most worldviews, has no particular reason to consider human beings as valuable, equal, or meaningful. Just as modern science owes its existence to theism, so too do the concepts of morality, democracy, and human rights. The positive impact of Christianity is clearly seen in history and in current events. The ideas of equality, self-governance, social welfare, and so forth are all rooted in Christian foundations. How much longer? Sorry, Richard? How much longer?
Got about 30 seconds left, sir.
Okay. And so forth are all rooted in Christian foundations. Even today, cultures with a Christian background are overwhelmingly ahead of non-Christian cultures in the various moral issues most atheists find meaningful. Pop culture frequently takes the position that Christianity is a philosophy of abuse. Consider the claim that religion causes war. Well, this is just nonsense. It's an internet atheist meme. Out of all the known and recorded wars in human history, only 6.98% have been caused by religion. You take away 4% of that amount, which were the Islamic wars, and you're left with 2.98% of wars that were waged in the name of Christianity. So Christianity's emphasis on compassion and peace has done far more to prevent and soften violence than it has to inspire it. Now, I just want to touch on the practical aspects of Christianity, if you can give me some grace, Richard. And if the practical effects of a belief system matter in a culture, and they do, they also matter in one's personal life. Atheists of all stripes throughout history have pointed out a major problem with atheistic thinking, and that is nihilism. Belief in pure naturalism or complete lack of a deity has logical implications. Force of logic leads atheists to reject objective morality, meaning, purpose, and so forth. This is a dominant struggle in atheistic philosophy. How to stave off nihilism or cope with its implications. This is the reason atheism, or non-belief in God, more than any other worldview, has lent itself as justification of the atrocities of dictators. And we just need to point to the 20th century for evidence of that. Ironically, this means that atheism itself presents good reasons to at least consider the Christian worldview. Why? Well, if there's no meaning, no purpose, or ultimate plan, then we might as well choose the worldview that leads to the best results, one that provides intellectual satisfaction, personal fulfillment, meaning, order, and morality. The data shows that Christians live longer, suffer less depression, have better employment, have less incidents of suicide, and generally have better overall health compared to non-believers. Almost finished. Have you, as you've listened to, the view of Christianity is in no sense driven by wishful thinking. Christians believe that logic, reason, and evidence are important aspects of a vibrant faith. At the same time, we acknowledge that intellect and reason are not the complete picture of human experience. Every person has their own reasons for their beliefs or lack thereof. Often these reasons are more emotionally driven than we'd like to admit. The message of the gospel is not one human beings instinctively prefer. But once a person truly understands the biblical Christian worldview, the caricatures, cartoon images and myths fall away, and what's left is compelling and powerful. So here's my final paragraph. Christians understand that no single article, answer, or conversation can completely cover every possible detail. Hence the reason why we have cool channels like Richard Mazdin's Demolishing Doctrine or Praise I Am That I Am. It's a plug. There are thousands of legitimate questions and concerns related to the Christian faith. Christians respect all people, including atheists. But here's the thing, even if you don't think that Christianity is true, I hope that you want to learn more about it. You have nothing to lose. At the very worst, you'll have a more accurate understanding. And at best, you'll come to realize what so many other skeptics or unbelievers have come to believe. And that's the fact that Jesus Christ is, in fact, the truth.
All right, and we're going to go next with Quentin, of course, and we are 4.5 minutes over on time. So, Quentin, if you would do your opening, and you have some leeway.
All right. Well, I'm going to start this opening off by saying I had written an entire opening statement, but my stepfather accidentally took it for gibberish that I wrote down on paper, so he unfortunately threw the thing away. So I'm going to do my best to just do this without any preparation. I hold to, as I stated before, I hold to the agnostic side of things, and my agnostic stance may vary from other people's, because I am dead set in the middle of, I am never going to claim that there is a definite God or there is definitely not a God. The reason why I hold to this is because I have no proof that can be substantiated that there is definitely not a God, but I also do not have the proof to show that God indefinitely exists. I also believe that religion, including Christianity, is not necessarily needed to have a morality or moral stance on certain topics. And sorry, my brain had a fart. There we go. Morality can be without religion for many things. You know, like I can know that stabbing someone in the face is morally wrong, based on what I've been taught throughout my lifetime, and not just how the Bible describes that murder is bad and is ultimately wrong. I also stand to the point where a lot of things that someone in their lifetime can be described by. I more hold to the belief that everyone ultimate control of what they do, even if a circumstance is out of control. And I also think that, to say that prayer solves everything, in my own opinion, and this is just me, I personally believe that prayer may not solve everything that people say that it does. Like, for instance, this is a good example of this. Whenever I left the faith, it wasn't just necessarily emotions that brought me away from it, more of the lack of facts that would prove to, open my eyes to God actually existing. And I came to question many things that whenever I would ask could not be answered to a satisfaction. Sorry, I'm messing my words up, dyslexic. So, that's pretty much all I have to say for an opening. I know it wasn't super long, but, that's what I'm working with.
That's all right. We'll allow you more time as we find opportunity to allow you more time out of consideration for the very short opening. Being
Okay.
that you went about 3.5 minutes. Okay. All right. So, gentlemen, this part of it will be free conversation. I expect you guys to be gentlemen to each other, and actually myself making more demands of the Christian than the agnostic, being that if he believes in his Christianity, he's supposed to be extra patient and loving of others, as he has earlier stated. So, free conversation. To the audience, I have to say, we apologize for the slight delay, but it turns out that Gavin Hurlimann is more than just a few miles away from us here in the United States. So, Gavin, it's your lead if you have something to comment on his opening or if you have a question.
Sure. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Quentin, for that opening. That was awesome. Quentin, can I ask you to steelman my argument, please?
I don't really know what that means, Gavin. You're going to have to give a little bit of an explanation for me.
Richard, do you want to describe what steelman means, or should I?
You're muted, bud.
Test.
Richard, if you're talking to us, you're muted.
You're right. Thank you. To steelman someone's argument is to put it in the best light possible to show that you fully understand what it is that they've said.
So I'll do my best, because I'm going to put this out here now to everyone, and the people that know me that are in the chat will know this. I'm not the smartest man on the earth. I graduated high school by the skin of my teeth. So basically, Gavin, what you're saying, if I understood it well enough, is that a lot of non-believers, they hold to the fact that they don't believe because they misinterpret what Christians are saying about God, and they take different things that they've learned over their lifetime to kind of slanderize God and not hold to the facts that the Bible shows. Am I on the right track there at all?
Not really.
If you want to explain it a bit better, you can.
Well, what I'll do is I'll do my best to steelman your argument, and then we'll just have general discussion. Is that okay?
Yeah, sorry. I was having technical problems. Yeah, that's fine.
So from just the few notes I jotted down, Quentin, you're saying that you're agnostic towards God, and that's fine. That's totally fine. That's totally fine. From the Christian worldview and through God's eyes, you're either in or you're out. There's no grey areas. There's no man's land, or there's no in between. But I'm happy to honour your stance as agnostic. Now, you talked about there's no need for religion in the sense of needing moral standards. I have to take great issue with that, simply because there's no such thing as subjective morality. No such thing as subjective morality. That's like saying there's subjective truth or relative truth. That actually doesn't exist in the real world. The reason why we get our moral standards, our absolute moral standards, is because we get them from an absolutely moral, perfect being. God's the necessary precondition of all logic and morality, because logic and morality are immaterial and they're universal axioms. And a simple example is 2 + 2 will always equal 4. It is not ever not equaled 4, and it will always equal 4. And the same goes for the divine command, you shall not murder. You shall not murder. Everyone in the world depends on logic and morality. We have to. This demonstrates that we depend on universal, immaterial, abstract realities that could not exist in a materialistic only world. So without a necessarily morally perfect being, as in God, then we couldn't rely on logic, reason, or morality, or all the other absolute universal axioms that are required to live in this world. We're just mere mortals. So we couldn't exist in a materialistic only world where there was no absolute standards or an absolute lawgiver as in God. For example, the laws of thought require a universal agent, mind, entity, or you can even dumb it down to person. Right? The laws of thought just don't appear out of nothing. Because how can we get objective morality from a materialistic non-morality, or how can we get rationality from a materialistic non-rationality type of being? This is really problematic for most atheists and non-believers, because you start with impersonal ultimates or a single ultimate, like the yet-to-be-discovered abiogenesis that seems to elude scientists for decades. But look, here's some random examples of cultures and regimes that have absolutely ignored the morally perfect, necessary axioms of God. I'll just run through the list. The French Jacobins, Stalin, Soviet Russia, Hitler's Nazi Germany, Mao Zedong's China, Pol Pot's Cambodia, Mobutu Seko Zaire, Idi Amin's Uganda, the Rwandan genocides in 1994 that were committed by the Hutus, where 100,000 men, women, and children were hacked to death by machetes. And at present, we've got North Korea's Kim Jong-un and China's Xi Jinping. So those are all examples of regimes that dispensed with the absolute morality of God and chose man's word over God's word. And history can be an absolutely cruel teacher at times. But if there's one thing we learned from the 20th century...
Gavin, this is starting to become a second opening. Could you state clearly what it is your objection is or what your question is, please?
Oh, I was steel manning Quentin's argument, but I've probably gone too far.
Quentin, you are Very good.
Yeah, I was just making sure Gavin was done making his point. I was actually listening to it, so I didn't want to interrupt if he still had a little bit more to say.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I probably went too far. I was sort of focused on the statement you said that you said something along the lines of we don't really need religion for absolute moral standards. So I was pushing back against that.
Would you mind saying that again for me, Gavin? You kind of broke up for me. I don't know if you broke up for Richard.
Sure.
It was kind of hard for me to make it out to the end.
Yeah, sure. How's my sound now? How's my sound? Test, test, test.
You're good now.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to steelman your argument, and you made the comment that that you don't think religion is necessary for moral standards, and I was taking issue with that because we've got evidence from history that we need an absolute, perfect moral lawgiver, and we can't find that. We will never find that in man.
I think I disagree with that because somebody just because certain people do horrible things because they're in power or they have the ability to cause someone else to suffer or make life harder for one person just because they claim they may not have a god or they claim to a certain god. Like for instance, I don't believe in God, and I go out in my community and I help out with watching kids whenever they get off school. Me and my friends and I have actually just started a program for children whose parents currently work after school, and we go and pick them up, drop them off, see if they need anything. So to say that we get our morals from God, absolutely, I disagree with. I think that morals can come from multiple different sources. For instance, if you watch a certain show that teaches that stealing from somebody is wrong, kids pick up on that quickly and they understand why, if I take something from somebody without asking, I wouldn't like it if they did it to me, so I shouldn't do this. And that's kind of one of the ways that I learned my moral standpoints. Like I learned that, I shouldn't go around beating up somebody just because I don't like the way that they dress or the way that they talk or who they are. I didn't learn that, from God or the Bible. I learned that because, I was put in a position where, unfortunately, I got beat up for who I was or who I was associated with. And it taught me from hard knocks that if I want to, like, for instance, if I want respect from somebody else, then I also have to give that respect. So to say that morality has to come from a God, it's kind of open-minded. I do agree that morality is not indefinitely subjective, but there are certain things that someone might call immoral that can definitely be a subjective thing. Like, for instance, you and I might disagree on the fact that a woman has the right to choose if they abort a pregnancy or not. So that's subjective to you and I. Can compare it to, like, if you were to talk to another Christian, they would agree with you that abortion is wrong because, God says that you shouldn't terminate a pregnancy. Whereas if I talk to one of my friends, we stand on the point where as long as there's an indefinitely good reason for this abortion, then there isn't something wrong with it.
So do you hold to the position that morality can be subjective?
Yeah, sort of. I would basically define myself as a hedonist, where I believe, like, just to break it down in the terms that I understand it, where if we want to decide what's good right now, Like it could be determined by everyone and not just a certain person. For example, like you and I, we want to go to a restaurant. For example, if we're hanging out and we want to go to a restaurant, well, if I make the decision and you don't necessarily want to go there, I have happiness, but you don't. Whereas if we both find a place that we both agree on, we're both happy because we both made the choice that we wanted, if that makes a little bit more sense. So where I stand in morality, it's more complicated in my opinion than just is it subjective or objective. Like one of the things that I hold very, very strong on is that happiness, just because you're happy doesn't mean other people shouldn't be happy. It's like I don't like one of my things is I like to go and make other people happy before I make myself happy, which it can be said that it's a bad thing or a good thing. But in all actuality, in my opinion, and some of the people that I live with and that I talk to on a daily basis, we hold to that where, you know, just because we're doing well doesn't mean we can't go and help someone else.
Sure. There's a big problem with subjective morality. Now, history is a great teacher, and history has taught us that subjective morality is nonsense. If we look at the 20th century, late 19th century, we have the French Jacobins, Stalin's Soviet Russia, Hitler's Nazi Germany, Mao Zedong's China, Pol Pot's Cambodia, Mobutu Seko's Zaire, Idi Amin's Uganda, the Rwandan genocides committed by the Hutus in 1994, and we've got North Korea's Kim Jong-un and China's Xi Jinping at the moment. Now, those are all examples of subjective morality, and the death toll from that subjective moral reasoning was innumerable. Millions and millions and millions died, were starved to death, were executed, etc., etc.
Right, but to say that the reason moral subjective, sorry, to say that morality isn't subjective because these people, they had their own morals and they just happened to be corrupt and they did kill all these people, in my opinion is, you know, yeah, this happened, but there's more instances of subjective morality that doesn't end in, you know, millions of people being killed for someone ideals. Because like for instance, you know, trying to think of the man's name, a good example of this would be like somebody that I respect. I'm not gonna drop their name because they asked me not to, but this person has subjective morals where he might not necessarily agree with everything that goes on in an abortion clinic, but when his daughter came to him and talked to him openly, you know, he asked her, "Are you sure you want this? Like, what makes you what's making you decide that you need to go through with it?" And she explained the situation. She explained what happened, and he even told her that he disagrees with what she's doing, but in the end, he loves and support her, and he helped her through that situation. So to say that subjective morality can't be subjective and end up in a good situation, I think isn't fair to a lot of other people that have subjective morality or hold to it. Sorry, not have.
Yeah, Quentin, I'm going to need more than just individual anecdotal claims. I sent Richard a long list of citations. Richard, you may want to email that to Quentin. But that list of citations has papers.
They're presently in the private chat.
Sure. That list of citations proves beyond doubt, as certain as we can in an uncertain world, that Christianity is overwhelmingly pro-social to the community, to society, to cultures, all of Western civilization.
I'm going to ask you to pause. We've lost connection with Quentin. if you could pause,
Oh,
please,
sure.
and we're going to continue back when he comes back in. And if he's not back in just a minute or two, then we'll have you do your closing. He's back. Just a second. And if you pick back up from about 30 seconds before I interrupted you, please.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
I pushed the wrong button.
You there, Quentin?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, Quentin, I'm going to need more than just one example of anecdotal evidence of what you claim as being subjective morality. Richard, I sent Richard a long list of citations a few hours ago that hopefully can email to you or pass on to you. And all of those citations are papers. Now, they're meta-analytical papers, and they're studies done by Pew Research Center out of Washington, D.C. And all of those papers overwhelmingly show that Christianity has a flourishing pro-social effect on society, on cultures, and on civilizations. There's only one paper, believe it or not. It's a 15-year-old paper that was written by Henry S. Paul, and it's one that Matt Dillahunty's been camped out on for the last 15 years, but he doesn't use it much now because it's so dated. But Henry S. Paul's a paleontologist, and he had a real axe to grind with young Earth creationists. And he did a univariate study of the social impact of Christianity on the community, and it turned out to be negative. But that's one paper that goes against the tide of thousands of other papers that show that Christianity has an overwhelmingly pro-social effect on society.
Oh, sorry. My connection cut out. Will you mind repeating the last few things that you said, Gavin, please? My connection is struggling a little bit.
Yeah. I sent Richard a long list of citations that I hope he can email to you, and all of those citations are papers that prove overwhelmingly that Christianity has a pro-social effect on society. There's only one paper in existence written by Henry S. Paul about 15 years ago that goes against the tide of thousands of other studies. And Henry S. Paul, he was a paleontologist who had an axe to grind with creationists. His is the only paper that goes against the tide of thousands of other meta-analytical studies. So obviously, Christianity has an overwhelmingly pro-social effect on society. Christians live longer. Christians have less incidents of suicide, less incidents of depression. They have better employment opportunities. They generally have overall better health when compared to secularists, atheists, or agnostics. Also, too, Christianity gives us something outside of ourselves as an anchor from where we get all of our absolute morality. We can't get absolute morality from man because we're all seriously flawed human beings.
Well, yeah, we are. I agree that we're all flawed, but just because I don't think that you have to have a God to be anchored to know that something is wrong. I don't think to say that only God can anchor a Christian to know for a fact that something is right or wrong because he tells a Christian to do that, and an agnostic can't be anchored down with knowing what's right or wrong because a God doesn't tell them to do so, or an agnostic is the same point. It doesn't make much sense to me because people can be anchored down by a lot of different things, like such as family or circumstances or past experiences that have taught them a lesson about what like, for instance, if you had something stolen from you, and then you're thinking about stealing from somebody else, you can learn from the experience that it brought onto you when you were stolen from, and you can take an objective point and look at it and say, well, this happened to me, and this is how it made me feel. So you don't really need a God to tell you what's right and wrong, to know the difference.
Quentin, where do you think we get the laws of logic from and the laws of absolute morality from?
I don't actually know the laws of absolute morality, to be completely honest with you, so I wouldn't be able to tell you.
What about the laws of logic?
I think that people have learned things from different people, and as time developed and as people came to understand more different.
Are you meaning
over time,
that
they came?
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Hello.
Gavin, if you would please pause for just a minute. Quentin, your phone was cutting in and out. Could you please start over your last reply?
Is it okay now? Can you hear me better?
Hear you fine.
Okay. So what I'm saying is I to know when something is right and wrong, simply because people can learn from past experiences or circumstances that have put them in a position that somebody might question the morality of, and to say that God has to be involved with somebody knowing what something is right or wrong doesn't really make any sense to me. And like I said, I'm not super educated on Christians' views on morality, mostly because I haven't really studied it. It's not something that I've personally picked up on. But the way that I've learned, certain does this mean, or what is this, like, how does this work? So logic can come from many different things besides what some people believe as God. I'm sure that if someone's a teacher, they had to go to college to learn that, and the person that taught them learned from another person. So I don't think God is necessarily the ultimate teacher. I think humans pick up on things as new knowledge and information comes out.
So as far as the laws of logic are concerned, Quentin, do you hold to like an evolutionary position with the laws of logic?
No, I do not. I don't believe in evolution.
So I'm not clear about your answer of where do the laws of logic come from?
I like I said, I believe that the laws of logic come from many different things. What somebody may have believed a couple thousand years ago to be true have been proven wrong now in our day and time, because we have technology to show that things change in the world, things change in our universe, things change constantly, and we adapt to those changes. We reform certain ideas. We take away what was said previously, and then we change it due to the new information that comes out.
So where do you think the law of gravity came from?
I believe that Isaac Newton questioned why we don't float into space, and he did an experiment, and he came up with an answer based on what his experiment showed.
Isaac Newton described the law of gravity, but the law of gravity didn't come from him. So my question is, where did the law of gravity come from?
I'm not 100% sure. I think that somebody somewhere thought of something, and they shared it with other people, and finally they got together, they discussed it, and this is how it came to be. Like a lot of different things that we know now today haven't just, somebody didn't just think of it.
I think he's asking not who theorized and best described gravity or what people think of gravity, but what is the origin of gravity itself, if you would, please.
Thank you. That makes a little bit more sense for me. Um, I really don't know, if I'm being completely honest. Like, I want to, like, if we're going on a science thing, I can't really answer that. Science isn't my strong suit. I don't really see it. And I don't really care about it as much. So I think gravity, the law of gravity, came about when people, like, people that were in a position to teach other people ask the question, why don't we float off into Richard, if you're talking to us, you're muted again, buddy.
I'm going to ask you to refresh again, please, because you're cutting in and out so much that I don't think anyone can understand what you're saying. Sorry for the inconvenience to you, Quentin, and everyone in the audience, and also Gavin. In the meantime, I would say, if everyone would please have your questions ready, there's going to be a question session unless something else happens or I misunderstood the debate parameters, so that your audience questions can be put in. But please do tag me by name so that I find it, okay? So we're going to give Quentin a second to refresh. Go ahead, Quentin.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
I hear a train.
Yeah, like I said, I'm outside. I'm not at home currently.
Okay, well, if you're traveling,
so give me a quick second to get away from it.
Yes, sir. So if everyone would have their questions ready, we're going to be doing that next. They're going to be wrapping this up in the next several minutes, and then we'll go to your questions from the live chat. Let's give Quentin just a minute to get where he needs to go. Sorry for the dead air time, guys. We're having some connection problems. Quentin, if you would start when you're ready, your last statement, if you'd start it over again, please, because I think it was just too broken to be coherent. Not that you're incoherent, but the statement itself was.
Right. Well, like I was saying, I don't study science. If we're debating a science topic, I couldn't do that with you. I don't know enough to give you a full answer, but to answer the question of where did the law of gravity come from, I honestly don't know. I think that a bunch of people asked the question, why don't we float into space? Why are we held to the ground? And then they started doing their own research. They started forming questions. They formed hypotheses, and they came to understand those questions, and they formed their idea and their theory, and eventually it came to be what we know as today as the law of gravity.
Okay. Should I do my closing bit, Richard? I can't hear you, brother. You're muted.
If you guys are ready for that, that would be just fine if both of you feel comfortable and agree.
I actually wanted to ask a few questions of my own, if that's cool. As long as my connection doesn't cut out again.
Go for it.
Okay. So Gavin, do you believe that God has to be present for someone to understand why something is wrong and why they shouldn't do something?
I believe that God is present everywhere, regardless of the circumstance.
Well, but the question is like, do you believe that God has to teach someone that they're doing wrong in order for them to know that?
Not necessarily. Each case has to be judged on its merits.
Well, that's basically what I was getting at whenever I was talking about why people learn different things, because as I've stated before, like God, I like just because I grew up in a Christian household and they taught me the different things doesn't mean I necessarily learned how I know what something is wrong and what's right because of what God says in the Bible. Because um, there are many different interpretations of the Bible that we can see today. There's King James version, there's New King James version, there's the NIV. So to like in each Bible, there's different, the verses are translated different. So somebody will read one verse and then in a Bible, and then they'll read it in a different Bible, and they'll be kind of different. So to say, like, I don't believe that God has to be there for someone to know what's right and wrong. Or another one is, I don't think God has to be there for a supernatural thing to happen or exist. What do you think? Does God have to be involved with a supernatural event for it to happen?
As far as transcendent events are concerned, like the resurrection, for example, that's an obvious one. Of course, God has to be present. His power has to be manifest on earth.
Well, like a good example that I have that I think that God doesn't need to be there for a supernatural event was a couple years ago when my mom passed away. Before anyone had told me that my mom passed away, I actually saw her standing in front of me when I was at work, and she waved goodbye. And then I knew right then and there that my mom was gone. She wasn't here anymore, that she had passed, even before my father had ultimately told me that my mom passed away. And neither my mother nor I believed in God. We didn't hold to a Christian or any other religious faith to, and so I don't think God was there to tell her, hey, go say hi to Quentin or goodbye. So I necessarily don't believe that God has to be involved with a supernatural event to happen.
Well, if you saw a vision, and I've no doubt, I've got no reason to disbelieve you. If you did see a vision, and I'm taking you at face value, the vision was either from God or from the enemy. If it was a transcendent vision.
Well, I don't think it was a transcendent vision. I more believe that, my mom came to me to let me know that, even though I was worried about, whether she'd live or not, because, she unfortunately had cancer, it was more of to calm me and let me know that, hey, I'm not suffering anymore because of the cancer, and that when she left, she decided that it was just her time.
Yeah, well, it's a transcendent event, and that transcendent is actually one of the virtues that's been highlighted by the American Psychologist Association, along with other virtues like courage, selflessness, bravery, that kind of thing. One of the virtues that they highlight is transcendence. So I've no doubt you saw a vision, but it would have been a transcendent vision.
Well, what makes it transcendent? Just because I saw her after she had passed?
Well, transcendent is simply something that's not physical and not of this world, not materialistic.
Right, but there's a lot of things that are out, like, can happen that are out of this world that we might not understand. That it doesn't necessarily mean that it that God's involved, or that there's a deity that is pulling the strings behind it. Like, for when I unfortunately overdosed a couple of years ago on OxyContin, and I was leaving for about a minute, is what I was told by the doctor. And when I was brought back, um, I didn't know where I was. But when I came to understand that I was in the hospital because of this. I don't think God told me, hey, I'm the one that brought you back to life. It was more of the doctors doing what they needed to do to keep me alive.
Well, you're totally free to believe that if you wish.
So do you I guess what I'm saying is, like, can you see where God doesn't necessarily need to be in a like in everyone's life just to for them to basically lead a good life, or do you think that God has to be there for someone to have what you would consider to be a good life?
Well, Quentin, the Christian worldview is that God is everywhere, and that's based on experience and upon knowledge and upon evidence. He's an entity. He's everywhere.
I I don't really think that's true. I think that if God is everywhere and he's all knowing, and if he has if like one of the things that doesn't make any sense to me is in Christianity that it's stated that God has a plan for everyone, but when you look at certain events that happen to people or the things that have caused to them, is that what God planned for them? Like, it's like the bad things that happen to people, for instance, like when an African child starves to death, was that God's initial plan for them to starve to death when he created them?
Well, can you show me a law or a rule that says a particular person has to live for a certain amount of years?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you say that again, please?
Can you show me? We're talking about the problem of evil. Can you show me a law or a rule that says a particular individual has to live for a certain amount of years or months?
For what reason? Like, to justify them being dead? Like, for them dying? Or what do you mean? You're gonna have to
Well,
explain that a little bit more.
you're talking about a starving child in Africa dying, which is part of the problem of evil. So my question to you is, can you show me a law or a rule that says that particular child was supposed to live for a certain amount of years?
No, but that would also, I could ask you the same question about how, like, is there a certain law that says that in an unborn fetus it is alive, because scientists have proven that, before a certain amount of time, that it's not counted as a living being.
So what is your question? Can you clarify your question?
Right, like what I was asking is the same question to you about abortion. Like, can you prove that there is an absolute law that just because there's a fetus in a person's womb that it counts as a living person? Because there's scientific evidence to prove that wrong.
Well, there's scientific evidence that proves after the first 36 hours of fertilization, the fertilized egg in the mother's womb has its own individual, brand new, never ever seen before and will never be seen again DNA.
Right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that it is a full person just because something's 36 hours old, or a few, like, just happens to start forming, doesn't mean necessarily that it's a living being. It because science, like, there's so many different scientific studies that say, like, you have to be like the baby has to be so old before it actually can start thinking for itself, or have any cognitive thought, and a fetus doesn't have that. So basically what I'm saying is, how can a child that's in Africa that was born and it's 3 years old and it die of starvation be less evil than someone who aborts a baby because of a certain circumstance?
We're just going around in circles, because then it comes back to my question. Show me a law or a rule that says any individual has to live for a certain amount of time on this planet.
No, but what I was saying was they don't. But that's what I'm getting at with abortion as well. Is it's not like Christians want to say that an abortion is murder, because that baby is alive when it's in the womb. But it's not just because something has life, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily dictated that it's evil to terminate something just because a certain circumstance it prevents. Like a mother, for example, if a mother cannot have that baby because it'll kill the mother, it's not necessarily evil. But to say that, an abortion is more evil than a god letting a child in Africa starve is kind of ignorant, in my opinion.
Gentlemen, if you'll start wrapping up your thoughts, we're going to go to Q&A from the side chat if you guys are ready for that. If you want to continue, that's fine. We can extend it past the hour.
Okay.
Whatever you want, Quentin. I'm happy.
I'm down to answer questions.
Okay, if you guys want to wrap up your thoughts, so you have a chance to finish your thoughts as you were speaking. I'm sorry to have interrupted.
Do you want to go first, Quentin, or do you want me to go
Go
first?
ahead, Gavin. Go ahead.
Okay. My objective in the debate was to show why Christianity is the superior worldview. I think I've done that. I haven't heard much in the way of objection from my learned opponent. The meta-analytical data shows that Christians live longer, they suffer less depression, they have better employment opportunities, they have a lower rate of suicides, they have generally better overall health compared to secularists, atheists, agnostics, free thinkers, etc., etc. The thing is that God gives mankind absolute moral standards that are outside of man. Once man puts himself at the same level of God or thinks he's as good as God, then all hope is lost. Isaiah 55, God is saying, my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. My ways are not your ways. And Christians tap into a long fabric of experience and history. And we've seen from the 20th century, for example, the absolute depravity and unreasonable loss of life when man decides that he is God, that he's going to ignore the absolute moral standards of an absolute and necessary moral being. I haven't had a satisfactory explanation for where the laws of gravity come from or the laws of logic. So I think just by default, this is a strong argument that I've put forward, and I haven't heard much of a defense. So with that, I will give my time over to my learned opponent.
Okay. Richard, I might take a few minutes to explain a few things, if that's okay. Basically, what I was getting at with what I was saying is I don't see that God is necessarily for anything absolutely to be explained. I don't think you can justify saying God gave us the law of gravity, therefore that's how we know it exists. I think that there's a lot more explanation than just a deity that watches over us and tells us these things. I think that man comes up with ideas and they put them to the test and they share said knowledge with people, and then it passes down, it gets refined, and over time it changes. And just like everything changes in the world. There's nothing like you can't show knowledge that we had 2,000 years ago to be the exact same as we do today. There are theories in science that get improved every day. We find new discoveries. And with the morality thing, I don't. If God was necessary to prove that morality is objective or subjective, you would have to show that God absolutely knows all things, and I haven't seen that yet. And I think that to say that Christians live longer and have happier lives above agnostic and atheists. I don't really believe that to be true. I believe that, if anything, that's kind of that's data that's kind of biased, where because you don't ask an atheist, well, does your religion or your lack of belief in a religion play into how your life is? Like, I think that people, they're born with circumstances that are out of their control, that they can't fix unless there's an outside force. Like, for instance, unfortunately, I've had my own issues, and I'm going to therapy to help get them fixed. But it's not a Christian therapist. They're not going to preach the gospel to me to help my underlying problems. They're gonna use facts. They're gonna use knowledge that has been passed down from other people to them. That there's no proof that God showed them how to understand it. And hang on, sorry. There we go. What was that? What I was saying was basically, if God has to be there for someone to understand what's right and wrong, then I think everyone would have heard God talk to them and tell them, hey, don't do that. You shouldn't do this or that. And I have there hasn't been any real proof to me that that's there, if that makes any sense. So my worldview is very simple. I believe in the fact that I can know what's good and good. I know what sorry, brain's running a million miles a minute. That's the downside of having ADHD. Sorry, let me get back on track real quick. Basically what I was saying. Oh, were you trying to talk to us?
So yes, please take your time. We'll just go ahead and tack on your extra 4.5 that you lost at the beginning of this right now. So please take your time.
Okay. Basically what I'm getting at is to know what's right and wrong. You have to learn it over time. It doesn't just happen automatically. You don't get your ideals or your purpose from God just one day appearing and showing up and saying, hey, this is what you're going to do in life. I don't necessarily believe that to be true. I believe that people over time, over their lives, they come to understand, like, this is what I'm meant to do. Like, you learn your talents, you practice said talents, you refine your crafts. You don't just pick them up overnight. It's a long process. You learn things through experiences. Like, if you go to cook a souffle and you burn the first three, you're not learning from the past mistakes. You're just continuing the same thing. Sorry, that was a bad example. That's just something I'm using from my life because that's happened 3 times now. But back to the point, you come to understand through your experiences that, hey, I did this right. This effect happened to somebody, or when I did this hurt somebody. So, I mean, I hold to a point where if you want to make the world a better place, you have to go out and get it. You have to go out and do something. You have to make an effort, even if it's a small effort, like in your hometown or in a city that you visit quite frequently. Sorry, like donate to a soup kitchen. Work with people that need it. Help the elderly. That's something that people can learn by themselves, not through a God. And I think that's what I was trying to mostly demonstrate here. Like I said, I don't know much about science. My downfall, I know some people have been trying to teach me that, and sometimes they might think I'm dumber than a bag of bricks just because I don't catch on as quickly as they might want me to. But I think that instead of God teaching you something, I think that you learn it in your own way. Like everyone learns, like when you go to school, you don't learn the same way Jimmy learns. You learn your own way. And I think that's basically what I was getting at. And I'm good to answer questions now.
All right, Gavin, you feel comfortable going to the question from the side chat? Are you good with that?
Yeah, good as gold. Fire ahead.
All right. So the first question, and I apologize. This is the only one where I didn't get the writer's name. So I apologize to the writer. I'm sure you'll recognize your own question. My question to Quentin is, how do you escape moral non-cognitivism?
Richard, would you mind explaining that a little bit? I don't know what that is.
We could talk about that off air sometime, but right now this is just the question that was posed. You can decline at this time if you like.
Yeah, I'm gonna have. I don't really know the definition of non-cognitism, so.
Can I
All
answer?
right.
Sorry
that?
to.
It wasn't stated to you. If Quentin's okay with it, that's up to you guys.
Go ahead, Gavin.
Yeah, moral non-cognitivism just simply means there is you don't recognize any ultimate right or wrong. So for the non-believer, for someone who doesn't subscribe to a necessary morally perfect God, they can adopt a non-cognitivist worldview. But yeah, see how far that gets them.
All right, next question from Remember Sammy Jenkins. What is this proof from history he speaks of? And I'm fairly certain he meant you, Gavin.
Sure. Proof from history. Christian proof from history. Well, the resurrection is one. Richard, is it possible for you to put that list of citations into the chat?
The chat's not going to allow that. It's just such a long list. I'd have to separate them, and I'm not prepared to do that. They are in the description of the video. If you have the video up on the monitor, you could scroll down.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, Christianity has got a long and rich history, going all the way back to the 1st century, to the resurrection of Christ. The fact that the resurrection occurred is an historical event, and that's recognized by New Testament scholars, whether they are atheist, secular, or Christian. No New Testament scholar says the disciples and Christ's followers did not see him after 3 days. All New Testament scholars, both atheist, secular, and Christian, say the disciples and Christ's followers believed they saw him in the flesh after he'd been dead for 3 days.
Okay, next question is from, I don't know how to say this, Devalinger. There's a few ways you could say that. I'm going to have him say that for me sometime. Question for Gavin. Is it objectively moral for a person to own another person as property like the Bible states?
Not today, because we're living in the 21st century. But when the Bible was written, it was different times, different culture. It was known as a high context culture, whereas we're living in a low context culture today. And slavery back in the A&E was not like the antebellum slavery we think about today, like in the south of the USA.
And for those who are unfamiliar, A&E is actually Alpha November Echo or Ancient Near East. He's not saying A and E, just so you know that. Next question from Remember Sammy Jenkins. Can he get an avatar that doesn't make us look up his pants? You don't have to reply to that. I think it was just a bit of humor, but you can.
No, it's fine. It's fine, Richard.
The next question from Brainbug. What is absolute morality? And it wasn't addressed to either of you, but both of you may answer.
Gavin, do you want to take the first answer, or do you want me to?
Oh, you go ahead. Go ahead. Go for it, Quentin.
So I'm probably gonna botch this completely, but I'll give it the old scholar try. College try, whatever. I think absolute morality is something that basically I don't agree with it, because basically what it's saying is the situation is black and white. There's no gray area. There's no way that a wrong thing could be the right thing to do at the time, or a right thing is never wrong. So basically what I'm getting at is it basically takes morality, and it's like, hey, so this is black and white. There can't be a situation where this is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do.
And Gavin, if you want to take a shot at that.
Sure. Absolute morality is absolutely simple. There's only two tenets to absolute morality. The first tenet is love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. And the second tenet is love your neighbor as you would love yourself.
The next question from Red Fang. Did people know right from wrong before the 10 Commandments? He didn't address it, but I'm thinking that's for you, Gavin.
Yes.
That was great. I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to laugh. Next question from Mine Onion. Question for Gavin. Have non-Christians ever done good things?
Now that's a very
Gavin, are you still with us audibly? That was for you. Okay, go ahead.
Test. Can you hear me okay? How's the sound?
Please
Hello?
go ahead. Thank you.
Have non-Christians ever done any good things? Is that the question?
Now I've erased it, but I think it read, have Christians ever done any good things?
Yes.
Okay, yes, it is then. From Jefferson Spatchcock for Gavin. If a child is destined to suffer and die before they had a chance to gain salvation, was that God's plan?
Well, again, it comes back to my question. You have to show me a rule or a law that says a certain individual has to live for a certain amount of time. And this is the one atheists love to throw at Christians. They'll take the most extreme example of a suffering toddler or something like that. God is sovereign. His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. The biggest problem that non-believers and atheists have is that they try and reduce God down into human form. So his question's a bit of a non sequitur.
The next question from Brother John. Gavin, do you believe in a literal place called hell? And if your God is omnipresent, is he there?
I don't think much about hell. I don't think much about heaven either, to be honest. But the most advertised, well-marketed, and most known event in all of mankind's human history is the Last Judgment. And there's going to be two groups of people, the unrighteous and the righteous. Don't be caught up in the crowd of the unrighteous. That's not a good place to be.
And the last question is again for Gavin. And if you guys will agree to after this, if Quentin, you wanted to say any last few things, because you've gotten how many questions? If you guys both will agree, that will allow him a few moments to say anything that he'd like about the topic. The last question from Korag Nightwolf. Can the Christian give us a definition of what a law is? I'm sure that's in reference to you having said moral laws. Go ahead.
Yeah, you shall not murder. That's pretty straightforward.
And that's the last of the questions. So, Quentin, did you have any thoughts or things you wanted to wrap up with as we end this tonight's event? Please check out, I believe it's still in order, it's still going on, Praise I Am That I Am, who will be doing an after party to this debate. And I would invite everyone in the audience to go and check that out. Go ahead, Quentin, if you would like.
Yeah, so a lot of people have been commenting the question. I think they're joking. It's like, well, how is Quentin losing this debate? And I'll be 100% honest. I didn't know that this was going to be like more of a you have to study certain things and know facts. I thought it was more going to be like our personal out views on world. So that's kind of why one of the reasons why, and I'm not trying to make excuses, but one of the reasons why I wasn't fully prepared for this. The other two things were, one, I've had a really rough last few days. I'm not gonna lie. I won't get into that, but I just want to throw out here, like, for some people, some people who follow Christian theology and their beliefs, I understand that, you know, and I've always said this, and I'm always going to. I respect anyone, whatever beliefs they have. I think that, you know, if God helps you get through your day and believing in God and praying to Him helps you live a better life, then I respect that 100% wholeheartedly. I see no problem with it. That's why I'm not huge on debating if God is real or not, because in my opinion, I don't need to. I simply hold to the fact that I don't know if God exists, and I don't know that He does. That's kind of where I'm at. My worldview is, you know, as long as you're not hurting anyone, including yourself, and you want to do something, do it. As long as it doesn't hurt children, animals, or other adults, and everyone in the situation is consenting and wanting to do it, then if it's a good thing, then do it. If it's a bad thing, then you know the difference between right and wrong. Everyone does. You know, they learn it and they understand what they're doing is either good or bad. So that's kind of how I see things, and that's kind of how I live my life. I know what's right and wrong, and I take every incident, every situation, and every possible outcome based on what I know to be right and wrong. And I think that's what I was just trying to explain here in the debate. But like I said, I'm not a very smart person. I never claimed to be. And that's probably apparent to a few people here that are watching this, but that's okay. You know, and I'm glad to. I'd be glad to. Hang on, just a second. My phone's freezing up. Basically, if Praise invites me to the after party to talk, then I'll be glad to do that there. But yeah, I think the conversation was a good one. If I disappointed anyone in any way with my worldview, I apologize, but I did my best. So that's really all I got to say.
Last thoughts, Gavin.
No, I'm good. Richard, thanks very much for the moderating. It was superb. Thanks, Quentin, for the discussion. It was excellent.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you for coming. Thanks, Richard.
All right, so if you guys would show what you're doing on your channels, and I heard rumors of an after party that I can't confirm. If someone can confirm that.
I don't know about the after party. I might be doing a little stream on my channel, which is, again, Quentin Phipps, Random Ginger. You know, I don't have any huge plans for the channel. I'm going to say every Saturday from this week on, I'm going to be doing a thing called the Non-Podcast Podcast, where I talk to people who may not always get a chance to talk to me or ask the questions that they want to. Anyone's welcome on. Every walk of life that, you know, is appropriate and who wants to join, go ahead. If you want to subscribe to me, like I said, it's Quentin Phipps, Random Ginger. You can follow me on Instagram. Just type in my name, you'll find me. I'm the only redhead Quentin there. But yeah, if Praise doesn't end up hosting an after party, go on and shoot up to my channel. I'll be sure to host one.
Well, if you'd go ahead and create that and put the link, or if you already created it, you could put the link in the side chat now for everyone to link to. If not, I don't know how you're going to distribute that, except through.
I can make one real quick. Yeah, that's not a problem.
If you wanted to and put that, I would. I do not restrict links on a trust by trust basis, but I don't restrict people from putting links in the side chat. I'm pretty sure you don't even have to be a mod to do that on this channel, or at least I didn't select that you have to be a mod. Gavin, did you already say everything that you wanted to say about what's going on with you and near future events, please?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine, Richard. I've talked myself to death.
Very good, sir. Well, I want to thank you, Gavin, and I want to thank Quentin as well for being gentlemen with each other, making your points, and letting the other make their points. So you were very much the gentleman I expected you to be, and thank you so much for allowing me and trusting me enough to do this with you. So thank you both very, very much. And as you're comfortable, you can let yourself out of the conversation by hitting that red circle there with the white X in the middle of it. And as you're comfortable, thank you all very much. I want to make special thanks to everyone who showed up for the side chat and the people who viewed who did not actually sign in. A long laundry list of people. Remember Sammy Jenkins, both of the Spatchcock brothers, and brother John, Mind Onion, the family, and several others. Really too many to mention right now. But thank you all so much for your questions and participation. I hope that you got an answer that you found satisfactory. So since that's it, gentlemen, thank you so very, very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Very good. Peace and respect to you all. Very good night.
Peace and respect. Peace and respect.
Have a good one, y'all.